Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. Last week, Ave Maria Radio was part of the Familiaris Consortio conference. This year, the theme was manhood. The theme was timely. Our public life is saturated with confusion about manhood, what a man is, what a father is for, what masculine strength ought to protect. I want to talk about that in light of two recent events as well, just within the past week or so, past 7 days or so. Number one, Leo Radvinsky. He was the billionaire owner who turned OnlyFans into a vast engine of monetized pornographic culture. He just died at the age of 43. Reports on his fortune noted that he drew roughly 1.9 million per day into the website at the stage of the company's explosive rise. Around the same stretch of 7 days, Chuck Norris died at 86. He left behind a very different legacy in the public mind. Sure, we've got meme culture, we've got all those jokes that I love quoting, but he also left behind an image of disciplined strength, marital fidelity, fatherhood, faith, a kind of masculinity that millions will look at and instinctively recognize as virtuous, decent, sturdy, protective. That contrast ought to tell us something about the social imagination of manhood. Society always catechizes, and the way this works is society adopts a social religion, whether it is truly following God or not, and then that social religion forms the public's imagination. So even when it pretends that it has outgrown catechesis, the society is catechizing. Its schools, advertising, cinema, law, comedy, algorithms, its reward structures, its celebrities, all of these things form the social imagination. In our own age, we now see what's rewarded is male vice, cash, clicks, reach. We treat male virtue as almost embarrassing. A platform that's built on sexual access and fantasy is going to father a decadent culture because you contrapose that with your average man, marriage in the family, the father who is trying to hold together a home, pay bills, remain faithful, raise children in virtue. We strive to do these things, but they don't raise alarm bells. They don't garner any attention. They don't garner any cultural applause. The market, in other words, reveals the desire of a culture. And right now, our desire as a culture is in disordered desires, and it's rushing towards the lowest bidders of the soul. This becomes even uglier when we remember the economic strain under which the average American family is living. The Federal Reserve's latest report tells us that only 73% of adults said they were doing okay financially, not even living comfortably. And that's below the level in 2021, so we're seeing a decline every year. In that same environment, Bankrate found that lower wage earners were likely to have no emergency savings at all. Earlier surveys found 41% of Americans say they could cover about $1,000 in emergency from savings. So that's a grotesque picture. Large swaths of our country are struggling with groceries and rent, debt, basic planning for the next financial hit. And then you look at this horrible digital empire of erotic subscription, and it throws off that astonishing daily income. It's a moral indictment of demand and supply, of media, of what our elites have conditioned our society to become. And unfortunately, the pornographic industry is a cause in some sense, but it's also a symptom, because all it is weaponization of loneliness for profit. This didn't arise through chance. The historical damage to manhood was a long and cumulative process. Industrialization weakened the older household economy because in that economy, boys learned manhood by proximity to their fathers and the craft of their fathers. When mass consumer culture developed, men were trained to think of freedom as acquisition and amusement. And then the sexual revolution came about and it severed the pleasures of sex from the demands of covenant and exclusive fidelity, fertility, duty, responsibility. It sold that severance as the new liberation. And then finally, our digital media intensified every disorder because now it places temptation and simulation and self-display inside every pocket. Each stage has weakened the classical grammar of what it means to be a man. Young men once had numerous social structures to teach them strength, sacrifice, authority, service, desire, and discipline. But all of those truths are now neglected, and it's been that way for several generations now. We've developed a culture that's producing men who are grown in body but childish in mind and soul. And I say this as an indictment to all of us. Take a look at the average high school student right now. We have allowed these young men to remain boys, and we tell them that they are boys. We treat them as such. And then we get baffled when they make mistakes at the level of, manly mistakes, and we don't hold them to that accountability. The media has also accelerated that decay. For decades, television and advertising have casted fathers as buffoons, as overgrown adolescents, emotional liabilities, dangerous incompetents. Research from the Gina Davis Institute found that male caregivers were nearly twice as likely as female caregivers to be depicted as incompetent, and so that reinforces the trope of the stupid dad. Earlier research by the University of Michigan points to recurring portrayals of fathers as emotionally unavailable, bumbling, inadequate. Now that image, if you keep pushing it into the society, it enters the bloodstream of the civilization. So the children absorb it, the wives absorb it, the men absorb it. Eventually, many begin to act according to the script that is forced on them. The father is now the punchline. The household has lost its central spiritual and moral anchor. Society pays the grand bill several years later, generations later, because when you do that to the image of the father in the household, you get chaos and alienation and a profound hunger for authority mixed with a distrust of authority. Then you've got psychology too. The American Psychological Association's guidelines on boys and men shows that male socialization trains boys towards self-reliance, emotional restriction, suppression of weakness. And there's some truth there. Frankly, there's a bit of virtue in that dynamic. But public discussion handles that issue with clumsiness. A mature civilization should be able to say two things at once. Boys require virtuous emotional formation. They require masculine initiation into courage, endurance, responsibility, and honorable self-command. Once those goods are detached from virtue, your masculinity will either become an irrational bravado or an image of a simpering coward. And that's why today masculinity is mocked. Many young men are bouncing between two distortions because no one is offering them the Christian holistic vision. That's why the death of Chuck Norris is actually a moment where we ought to not take for granted a lesson. The memes were funny, to be sure. They exaggerated a trait in him that people already admired, his competence. But his public persona also had a moral content. He generally played men who defended the weak, punished evil, honored women, or exercised force, but only within a moral horizon. He was at least naturally virtuous, and in his personal life he was widely remembered as a Christian. A devoted husband, a father whose children praised his integrity, his protection, his guidance, and his love. So you can sneer and call all of that old-fashioned, but look at the fruit. The human heart still recognizes honorable manhood when it sees it, even if it exteriorly mocks it. And that's the pathway forward. Friends, especially fathers, men, we have to rise up. We have to recover a more serious moral vocabulary. Yes, our sons need our affection, and they need it from our fathers more than anything, us fathers more than anything. But from us, they need us to call them out to expectation, duty, hardship, boundaries, the curtailing of virtue in strength. Men, we need to repent of passivity and to actively take the forefront, now more than ever, knowing that we will be mocked for it. Because here's the reality. The society doesn't allow us to fight for family life, and yet a holy culture depends on us doing so. Stay tuned, I'm Marcus Peter.